we know to argue, we know how to advance our own position, but we don't know how to collaborate.
I'm going to record this meeting, so we'll start the recording so people who are not available could listen to the meeting and go through the slides if they desire. Thanks for that feedback, Dave. I think that's just spot on with what this productivity advancement team is aimed at. It's to drive design so it better supports construction and the other life cycle elements of projects. Looks forward to handover and operations as well. And many of us who have spent long time in our careers in design, realize when you start design, you're really taught to produce drawings or produce things to give a contractor, and you're really not taught construction or methods, and it comes from a lot of learning and seasoning in the industry, and looking to how we can better establish that collaboration and orient design to improving efficiencies, effectiveness downstream, and continuing to bring on board pragmatic thinking and experience. The example you were just going through of the hotel building where beams were made too lean and weights weren't properly considered is an example of when you're trying to get lowest cost out of a building and using design tools. You need the practical experience of someone who's been through those projects and can add the knowledge that comes often only from experience. And so great to have you engaged with us, and we're going to leap forward into our agenda. Since we have a fairly light turnout, I think mostly due to vacation schedules, but also, during the summer, people are trying to save more personal time, and it means their business schedule gets more filled and dense, and so being available for Fiatech meetings tends to get more difficult for people in the summer months. So Ted, what I said as we were waiting to get started, Ted Weitzman's not on the call. He's our owner leader for this productivity team. He sends his regrets. He had a last minute change and a couple of vacation days with his family, so those vacation days are hard to come by for all of us, and he sends his regrets that he couldn't be here today. Here's the agenda that I put forward, and I'll fill in for Ted, and any of you all could help with that also. So we'll start with a review of our action items, and then we'd like to have discussion and dialogue. Will be with a fewer people on that, won't be quite as robust, but we'll welcome the input from everyone that could participate today. So on an introduction, the discussion we've just been having, that our target for this productivity team is to improve construction productivity by 10% and support improvement in handover and facility operations, really to drive leveraged benefit out of design for the other elements in the life cycle of projects. And when you look at the cost of design compared to the savings it could produce in other areas of the project, it's sensible to drive towards that savings, which is often a factor of 10 or more greater than trimming up just a little bit on design. So we have support through our owner community and participants in Fiatech to go forward with that collaboration direction. So our meeting objectives today are to move forward on sharing information and begin establishing priorities on where we're going to drive our activities, and to look at the automated design productivity and readiness tool and provide any feedback for that. Gary's also going to take us through some discussion on group dynamics. So next slide. This is a highlight of our productivity improvement tool. I'm not going to go through it. We might come back to it during the call. So and you can access it off our Fiatech PAT website that's available at this link. We're looking at building enabler. We have an enabler list in the productivity tool, and we'll look at how we survey that and get at available information that might help with that, as well as where gaps and opportunities are. And we'll talk about that more as we go through today's call. So the productivity improvement tool is formed around these 4 questions, and then with those questions looking at opportunities, and there are 59 different ones listed. I don't think that's a fully comprehensive one. There could likely be many more, but a pretty good starting list to look at opportunities for efficiency improvement. So hope you've had a chance to look at our productivity improvement tool, and if not, then you'll take that opportunity around this website link. So with that, we'll go to group dynamics review, and Gary, if you would take us through that discussion.
Sure.
I have the first
in another one,
the Tuxman's model on.
Yes, sir. In another PAT team, PAT 11, the one for facility rollover or facility turnover, however you prefer to view it, the chairperson, Richard Ellis from Dow, thought it would be useful if we did a quick review of the group dynamics model. Now, I will ask before we go through this if any of you or if all of you have been through some sort of training or are generally familiar with the Tuckman model.
I'm familiar with it.
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay.
No, not I.
So, who is the not I?
Dave Ruby.
Ah, okay. Well, Dave, basically Tuckman, groups have been studied to death, right? So everybody's got their idea on how groups behave and why, but the Tuckman model, which is now 50 years old, is very common and has stood the test of time. And the idea is that groups go through 4 stages: forming, getting to know each other; storming, where you have an exchange of ideas, and occasionally that exchange can be impolite and a little loud; norming, where the group starts to behave in a regular, routine way; and then the best groups reach a performing stage, and a high-performing group is a group where a challenge gets put before a high-performing group, and the high-performing group works together in a way that yields the best possible result. Anyone who's really honest probably would say that they've been very lucky if they've been part of 2 high-performing groups in the course of a career. Then in '75, Tuckman put forth the idea that adjourning is also an important part of group development, because when the group has accomplished its goal, it really owes itself some sort of formal termination. You've all been part of groups that have gone on forever and ever, even though they no longer have a task in mind. They just kind of exist because the group likes to exist.
Yeah.
So the keys to the Tuckman model is it takes time and hard work to develop a high-performing group. I mean, you really do have to work at it. High-performing groups just don't occur because everybody knows their role. High-performing groups require more than that. And changes in group membership, which we will undergo, and changes in group norms will cause a restart in group development. So as we get new people, we may have normed ourselves, and we may be on the verge of really being high-performing, but new people will come in and they'll have a learning curve. And so the group has to be ready to accept the fact that we'll have to do a little bit of reforming and maybe some storming as people come and go. And because of that, we would say that groups are living things, and have to be prepared to adapt as situations change.
Okay.
So the points to keep on the forefront of your mind as we go through all of the projects and tasks related to the pet is that speak your mind, but tolerate other points of view, because we're going to have a lot of other points of view. Active listening and participation are important parts of developing a high-performing group. Active listening being listen to understand. Don't listen just so you can find something to argue with or something to challenge so that you can put your own opinion forward as the controlling opinion. And we need you to participate. We need you to honestly participate. In a high-performing group or on the way to a high-performing group, deliver on your promises. If you say, I'll take something over that'll be, mine to work, well, deliver on your work. And then the other thing is stay on target. Don't get down into rabbit holes, or if you find you're in a rabbit hole, climb on out. If you find in the course of the group work that you're not looking at the correct target, well, then adjust the target. So, targets can change because we may find out some things that challenge our own biases. And when that happens, if we need to adjust the target, we adjust the target. One thing to realize is that a group may never reach this performing stage by academic definition, but it can still accomplish the goals that it sets out for itself. It'll be a little harder than, or maybe a little slower than if the group reached the high-performing stage, but the goals can still be met. Does that make sense to you, Dave?
Yes, it'd be good. I appreciate you taking the time to go through that. I understand the concept, although I never understood it to be someone's theory.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of literature on this, as well as other group dynamic models. But I can tell you that the military teaches this one still, and obviously based on the fact that everybody else on the call is generally familiar with it, it remains very common, and that's because it's an effective way to think about how groups behave.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Gary.
So then the next slide, I believe, is the issue of questions for the participants to consider and discuss.
Actually, I moved that a bit later. I want to go through a couple other things before we get to the questions.
Sure.
But also echo Dave's comments that it was really good to go through that for us. And this team is certainly in the early forming stage, and that can be a very challenging time. How to go at a pace everyone wants. People tend to view that differently. Some will have a lot of impatience and urgency, and others will desire more planful. So we have to find a right norming around our pace to get underway, and that requires a lot of input and dialogue. So really encourage people to, as the slide said, speak your mind and actively participate, and we'll get the group going on highest priorities through that interaction, and a key part of what we want to do in our session today. And I've been through this model before. It's really great insight into how groups and teams engage and form. I'd say it is pretty rare to actually get to be a truly high-performing group, but you can, as Gary said, still accomplish your goals and be a strong performing group without everything getting in place to have that really powerful group engagement that doesn't come about very often, that makes truly extraordinary teams. Okay, another part of the action item list is the last part. So we started with action items. We went through the productivity improvement tool highlights, and and the discussion on group performance. The last part of the action items was around the collaboration tool. So Ted, not on the call, but he reported in our last call that Southern Company would consider using their SharePoint provider site, but only for this PAT. And Ted was troubled that we would have a solution here that might be different than others, and would encourage us to have a common solution for our PATs. And they would prefer other options. And I described, we're beta testing this team collaboration tool, Slack. I'll give kind of repeat on the highlights for it today. We've got that up and running on 4 of our PATs, and we'd like to see how that goes and participation occurs before we go put the energy into establishing it for all 12 of our PATs. But initial feedback is very positive, and I'll go through that description here in just a minute. With the Slack collaboration tool, we also need some information storing, and we had talked about Dropbox for that, and Fiatech has access to the University of Texas equivalent to that, UT box, and we would prefer to use that. So as we get underway, we'll start to see, does the team collaboration site work, and we'll get people access to information to post and share and access information on the UT Dropbox type site, just a file storage site. The enabler survey is embedded in the productivity advancement tool. It's the 59 enabler items, and we were looking at a Google survey instrument for that, and we set it up on 3 or 4 of the PATs, and we were not getting much uptake from members to go through that, so it was not getting high engagement of members. So we feel probably not best to continue building that on the rest of the enablers if people don't find that as a highly desired access point to go through the productivity tool information. So we would build it into the Slack tool site is the current proposal, and that's pending a bit more feedback on the beta testing that's out there. All of the members, though, can go through the PAT productivity tool and see the enablers and gain your own information on that. It's not a survey type method to do that right now. While we look at what will inspire, encourage, bring forward the participation from members in a way that they find user-friendly and convenient. So all the Fiatech members have been informed that our PAT tools are complete, but we haven't reached out to them specifically on this team till we get closure on what site we're going to provide for it. We did conduct an enabler survey, an interest survey at our annual conference, and anyone who signs in on our PAT site also gets asked interest level on PATs. And from that, we've got over 40 people who've expressed interest in this PAT, and I have been sending them the notes from our meeting and the recordings that we make and the information we're generating. So we have a large group that's out there with interest in information on how this is moving forward, even though many of them are not deciding to participate in our team meeting, and that I think is okay. It'd be hard to conduct a meeting around this discussion with 40 people. We have about 20 that have expressed interest and are signed up for the team, and I think that's a pretty healthy number given that at any meeting time several of them are going to have conflicts, and if we could have 12 to 15 people on our meeting, that would be a good sized discussion group. So I do encourage you to go through the enablers, and we'll get that moving forward to a accessible site as we gain feedback on the current team collaboration sites. So I'll just skim through this quickly. If you're not familiar with the Slack software tool, It's a team collaboration site, has these attributes. You can search on the web for it and gain information on it. It's currently being ranked as the top team collaboration site, and they have agreed for us as a nonprofit to use it with no fee up to some limit of size and capacity that's really enormous. So we think they're motivated to share their site with us because they want all our members to become familiar with it and consider it in your organization. So we're a kind of leading test for them to get awareness of what their tool can do. This is what the environment looks like when you go to the Slack team site and attributes. I'm not going to go through it, but you can look at this when I distribute the slides from the meeting. And then how that's working is to take our productivity tools, and within the Slack team collaboration site, they have channels which are somewhat like folders, but information channels where we can post all of our enablers here and begin to gather information around those. And that's how it's being implemented on the test paths that are moving forward with it. So it looks very robust. It's very easy to use. There's some quick, like 2-3 minute tutorials on the website that describe it. Encourage you to go investigate it. I've been through several of them, and I'm excited about the potential it provides to us. So that's it on the, we have a couple more action items. I thought I only had 2 slides on it, but I have a third one. The Fiatech Leadership Forum is coming up. It's on our agenda to discuss, so we'll cover it at the end of today's meeting topics. We have a early bird discount for it, which ends August 1st. So this is the last week of early discount. The Leadership Forum is September 19th to 21st, so plenty of time to register, and we'll be talking about what we want to do with the automated design PAT team for it. And then the last item is PAT team members are encouraged to submit information around the enablers and around technologies for automated design, and that'll be key discussion topics for today. So move on to the next agenda item for us. It's looking at actions for advancing the PAT team forward. You're probably reading through this list of 5 items as you're going through it. Just how we want to move the PATs forward of assembling leading practices, identifying barriers and gaps that prevent implementing those practices or development of other practices, identify emerging technologies that are out there for us to look at and consider, and maybe do pilot projects or demonstration projects around them, and then identify priorities and actions, including Fiatech projects that would help advance us towards achieving the productivity target, build an action agenda for that. And then that leads us into our discussion topics for today, which we hope to spend a good bit of today's meeting time on. And I'll turn it back over to you, Gary, to take us through our discussion topics. Thanks. Are you on mute, Gary?
Regretfully, I was on mute.
Okay. So we have the questions for participants as we slide 13 in our set today.
Yes, so we had some very good discussion the other day in PAT 11 about this. Again, Rich Ellis thought this was an important thing, and although we say we're member-driven, occasionally we're not always as careful about ensuring that we know what our members are actually seeking as we could be. So we want to throw the floor open to our participants to talk a little bit about what you think you personally hope to gain by participating in the PAT, how you think your company hopes to gain by your participation. Do you have an idea already about what direction you think the team needs to take? Do you have a clear understanding of what the team is expected to deliver? What experience do you have that led you to decide on this pad as the one that you want to participate in versus one of the other pads? Or are you going to participate in multiple pads? And do you, or does the company you work for, or do companies that you have worked for in the past, do you have experience, documented experience, where someone you worked with had attacked design efficiency and been able to reduce design costs or do some other productivity activity that yielded a particularly considerable and somewhat unusual advancement? You know, firms have various ways of doing things, and while we tend to think the process is always the same, there are occasionally firms that have, in fact, done something unusual and had a tremendously positive outcome, and that information is not always shared. So I'm going to throw it open to you all to talk a little bit about what you hope to get out of it and how you think we should go forward. Who wants to start?
This is Alan. I'll start a little bit here. Since I am retired and no longer working with a company or on projects, you know, my participation is mostly to hopefully share, you know, my experiences, try to help, you know, the path move forward towards supporting what industry really needs to go forward at this point in time. So that's really, you know, from my standpoint, where I am at the moment. The projects I work on right now, I currently have a garage project at my house with a contractor who is seriously in need of the ability to communicate better on a project, even on a small project. But still, you know, that doesn't really relate to this type of work. So anyway, that's where I am, and you know, I'm looking to contribute to try to help people, you know, move forward with, you know, the goals that the companies have nowadays to help make things more efficient, because I've seen a lot of inefficiency over the years, and this hopefully will lead towards improving some piece of project activity.
Alan, have you taken the time to read the enablers that we've listed in the PAT tool?
I started to yesterday. I haven't got through everything on it, but you know, I was just coming up to speed since I'd just been home only for about a week right now, and I looked on here and saw the meeting was today, so I started reading some stuff last evening, and but I haven't gone through everything yet on this, for what you published.
All right. I mean, one of the key things that we want to do in fairly short order is to determine whether those things we've identified as PAD enablers really are enablers. And then, of course, gaps in those enablers and how those gaps could be overcome. And, of course, there's the information gathering of what are firms currently doing that meet and don't meet those enablers.
Well, I will get through them right away and get back with you on some thoughts on those, so that I can, hopefully within the next few days, so that I do give you some feedback on those.
Okay. Who's next? Dave Ruby?
Excuse me, I was on mute because I was had a sneezing jag, so I thought I'd better get off. Where I am, I've read what we've done so far, where you are, and I'm looking at it from a point of view, can I or my organization or our experience actually provide anything that would be of value to this group? Our organization focuses very much on cost reductions, et cetera, with regard to it, because we work so closely with contractors. So, but I've gone through some of the enablers, and when I read them first, they obviously are at least what I perceive them to be, much larger companies have the ability to have teams within the companies that do certain elements, and they focus on that. Now, on my organization, which has 40-some individuals, and we're all project related, time we have into those sorts of things are, well, not directly assignments. You have things you have to squeeze in between. So I like what I've read so far. I think it has I think there is help there. What I don't know is if we as an organization and our experience can actually add anything of value to where you are headed. And looking at this automated design system, when I read those things, my concern in the design area, and maybe I'm off somewhere else, but my feeling there's too much in the design process that do not have construction knowledge or experience or understanding. So they are guided and directed by the automated computer software piece of what goes in comes out, and and it worked in the model. Well, that's the area that I'm concerned about. I want to utilize technology going forward, but I want it to be an intelligent usage of technology, and I don't want it to become my decision maker. I just want it to be my data gatherer. And that's what, when I'm looking at the process that we have and where we're headed, I think that is your focus. It appears to me that that is it. But I look at some of the companies that are involved, and although they are designers and, quote, builders, but they're all in the same organization. So that comes out much different than those of us on the outside of design and then must work with independent construction managers and general contractors. So I'm looking at this as an observer as to whether anything that we can put in that would be helpful, or anything I can see in there that we can learn, that we can transfer into our economy and our client base, whatever that might be. So that's where I am. I'm catching up, Gary, on this, because obviously I have not been on everything right for the last few months. So I am really catching up. I do like what I see so far. I think there's been a lot of effort and a lot of thought process, and people have actually been questioning. I see in those questions they're questioning what they do or what they're presently doing. So I'm encouraged by what I see.
Well, if I heard you correctly, and it may be an incorrect interpretation of mine, but if I heard you correctly, what I heard you say is that one of your first observations is that the enablers appear to be not limited in scope, but they may be written in a way, or they may be phrased in a way that makes it difficult for a smaller company to benefit from them.
Yes.
And if that's correct, then I would, right now, for the moment, I would opine that your biggest contribution is pointing that out and being that independent observer, because we don't intend, I don't believe Fiatech as an organization intends deliverables that describe best practices for big companies only. I think we intend to describe work processes and practices that work for everybody, so that anyone can look at it and say, well, okay, maybe I need some sort of large organizational infrastructure to make this happen, but the work process in it, just in terms of thought, can be brought down to a more, to a smaller organization just by considering these particular steps. I want you to stay with us, Dave. I don't want you to walk. I want you to stay with the group.
Well,
after all, you were a major inspiration in the collaboratory.
Well, I would like to remain, and what I really want to do is to see where we can be, where we can help in putting this process together, because there's we have the tools. We have the tools to do so many fantastic things, but we're well, I don't know. I don't know soapbox today. I won't do that. So I appreciate what you've got, and I'm encouraged by what I read, and I'm encouraging a couple of my staff to become involved with this, so that we can see how we can generate it. We can do it. We are doing things like this much on a smaller basis presently with a general contractor and one of the major automotive manufacturers, and we have put together a team to actually design, build, manage, and construct 5 automotive facilities across the country in a very, very, very limited, quick schedule. And so the whole thing is communication. If you can't get there if you don't communicate, and that concept of how teams work is very helpful. So I'm encouraged by what I see.
Well, I really hope you attend Leadership Forum or have somebody from your company attend Leadership Forum. We'll talk a little bit about it later.
All right. Thanks.
Ray, you work for one of the major design firms in the world, along with Alan. You want to throw some thought out here?
I can. I hope what we do will fit smaller businesses as well as larger ones. My career was spent in larger firms, so I know my thinking gets biased in that direction. But the design steps are the same, although I appreciate they'll be done differently in a smaller firm. I did early in my career for the first 10 years or so work in a firm that was about 100 people in the design side of the business. So, and even in the big companies, you get to project teams. We do projects of various sizes. You do have a lot more resources that support what you're doing, but you work on design teams sized to those projects. I will, though, really value perspective from Dave on what direction the team's taking and what kinds of things would benefit organizations of his size. I'd like to hear from a couple of other people on the call. So, Ken Fry, what are your thoughts around the questions, and what input do you have for the team?
I'm looking at question number 1, and I'm approaching this from an organizational change management perspective. There are 12 paths, and I am participating in a couple of those. One of them is the change readiness one, and that is all about changing the organization, transforming from what they're doing today to something different, and we all know how challenging that can be. So I'm kind of wondering how that path is going to integrate across the other 11 hats. I work for Siemens. I'm in the software division, but Siemens as a company as a whole, we own facilities, hundreds of facilities that we have to maintain and operate. We also, create, we're, as you know, equipment manufacturers. So we have the same challenges that this industry has. So I'm trying to improve divisions within Siemens and also sell software to help other owner-operators and EPCs. And so number two, the direction that I think I would like to take is to use a framework that's also well known, similar to the form, storm, norm, and perform. I didn't realize that has been around for 40 years and that based on some theory. But there is an organization called ProSci which has a world recognized framework. The company is called ProSci, and I'm certified in that, and I think it's pretty easy for me to take that methodology and apply it. It's very simple. It uses the ADKAR model. ADKAR is an acronym for what is the awareness of the need for change. D is the desire to support and participate. K is knowledge on, do you have the knowledge on how to change? The second A is, do you have the ability to implement the change? And the last is reinforcement. Do you have reinforcement within your organization to sustain it? And what I found out is using a quick scale of 1 to 5 for each of those, whenever the score is below, the first in that acronym that score is below a 3 is the bottleneck that maybe we should address for this particular PAT. So one PAT, the bottleneck might be awareness of the need for change. A different PAT, the bottleneck might be our desire to support it or participate, and another might be just we don't know how to change. So I think that's a pretty good framework that I'd like to get some dialogue up on Slack and maybe discuss whether we want to draw this out and use it. I've also noticed, and by no means am I an expert in this industry, I have lots of experience in automotive and aerospace and defense, and my company's moved me over here just in the last couple of years to take my experiences and apply them to this industry. So if I misspeak, just please forgive me because I'm a little naive, but some of the observations I found is that the owners are very willing and very cost conscious right now, but the EPCs are looking at the trend towards lump sum, but let's be honest, that's just moving it just slightly. Some companies' current lump sum percentage is only 16%, and they're thinking next year it might move to 18% of overall contracts, so that's not going to get it. So they're just happy with, and I'm just speaking for some EPCs, and again, I'm not trying to make any generalizations, but reimbursable rates, there's not much incentive to cut these costs. So it's the what's in it for me that I have to kind of address. I love what Fiatech is doing to bring this awareness and getting the team going. I think it's the right method to change the industry. It's just going to be pretty long and painful. I've worked out some ideas on how the EPC might improve their margins, which are right now razor thin, by applying these principles. Some of it's going to have to be contract changes that the owner is going to have to look at the contract and somehow incentivize them to use these tools. I've known from the automotive industry that sometimes to get these things going, the automotive industry sometimes bought these tools. I'm going back a couple of, almost 2 decades now, like 15 years. They actually purchased these tools and gave them to their suppliers just to incentivize them to use them, because they knew this, similar to a handover process where the owners, or I should say in this case the automakers, were burdened with receiving their digital formats and translating it. Think of handover, right, in their concept. It's very costly for them. So if you use our tools and we receive them in the format we need, okay, we're going to buy that stuff for you. So that's how does that make sense?
I think that was very insightful and really helpful, Ken. Thanks, and it covered a lot of areas there. I wasn't familiar with the ADKAR model, so I will go do some research on that. But a really great structure to think about how to move change forward. I'm familiar with kind of an observation on how changes takes place. So it's kind of got a parallel to ADCAR, but would not match up one for one. And it describes people go through a transition through 5 steps of unaware. So why would there need to be a change or information or something different, or where are the gaps or problems or opportunities? And aware of kind of, okay, here's what is potential out there, and then maybe understand to begin to appreciate what that might mean and what the business value might be, and then what the drivers are to do that, and then a belief that says, okay, well, I not only understand and hear the drivers and motivators, but I believe we need to do this and benefit will be achieved, and then act. So if you can move people through that transition of unaware, aware, understand, believe, and act, then you can accomplish change. And I think it's great to have a number of models to look at in this area, because change is very, very challenging to do, as you described, Ken, and helpful to look at it from a number of different perspectives, to be thinking about all the things you need to influence and encourage in order to effectively achieve change and to move that along in an efficient way. Okay, Ed, we're at almost at the top of the hour, but it'd be good to hear from you also. What are your thoughts?
Yeah,
questions.
Well, first of all, I want to make it clear, I really feel uncomfortable trying to represent CH2M because it's too big, and I'm not in a position to know what the company line would be. So I'm just going to talk from my personal experience. And part of what I heard you talking about, Ray, actually rang a bell with me, is that, in automation, what really was driving my interest in automation in this is trying to find those things that I can use to help supplement what we're already doing. Because the company thinks they're doing everything they can now in their automation, and we do great things in intelligent modeling and passing information to contractors and things like that. I really like working for this company for that reason. But I came from a smaller company before this, that really had a different model in use, where it was the designers, the licensed architects and the licensed engineers that were in the model using it, and that led to that higher level of teamwork, because we all knew what we were doing, we all knew where we wanted to go, and we could simultaneously be working on the same thing in the models and in the work we did. Actually, before then it wasn't models; it was 2D graphics, but we were still working with each other more directly. I'd like to marry the two, but I can't seem to get that. I can't seem to get that to happen in this company. We still have a compartmentalization that, the modelers are modelers, and they're really good at it, and the designers pass information off to the modelers, and there's always a break. And so to really improve the efficiency, that break, I think, has to somehow be dealt with. So that's where I'm looking for. I'm looking for, this kind of productivity improvement coming from how we use the tools, and much less about what the tools are, because I think we have the tools, we just need to know how to use them.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Well, Gary, really good dialogue from our team, and it'd be great to hear from other team participants who aren't on the call today, so we can continue that into our next discussion. And we're at the top of the hour, so we're running out of time. Maybe I'll just quickly scan through the rest of our slides. I had 19 or 20 slides. We're only on 13, and so we're only 2/3 of the way there. But I'll just quickly touch on the remaining ones. This slide shows on one of our PATs. This is the PAT that is working on reducing owner-initiated change orders, and they're doing short videos, 8 to 10 minutes. Well, these are 11 and 20 minutes, but the target was 10-minute and less videos, that gives some sharing of leading practices by companies on elements related to the enablers. So as we go forward on this team, we'd like to start building a library around the enablers of practices in different organizations that drive value gain around the enabler opportunity. And as we look at this slide, just 15 just shows, as we look at where do solutions for enablers come from, well, they really come from anywhere. Here's just some thoughts on where they might be brought forward from. And Deb McNeil from Dow Chemical, who's had a strong engagement in building our productivity target approaches, well, she has a view around the enablers, and you know, across the 12 PAT teams there are probably 500 enablers. But around those enablers, that a large number of them have leading practices out there. If we were willing to share, we could gain a lot just by dialogue with one another, and especially in the owner and EPC community. So encouragement that we look for ways to share leading practices and begin building those for people to have information about. And so they could come from anywhere. So, well, that's it around discussion of actions and enablers and kind of path forward on the basic part of the PAT team process. A couple things to go through on our leadership forum. It is September 19th to 21st. We have an early bird registration. It ends August 1st, so that's Monday. Essentially ends this week. We've got I think 30 people registered now on our, this is intended to be a smaller meeting of members and invited guests. You have a target in the range of 120 to 130 people, so you know, it's 2 months off, and we have a fourth of the registrants there, which I think shows the high interest in our leadership forum session this year. Just some highlights on the session of what we'll cover, and you'll get this in the sharing of the slide presentations. And for the PAT team, each one of these PAT teams will have a workshop session that we need to build and develop and create. We have an early description of what's intended around the workshop session. These are hour-and-a-half sessions on each of the PAT teams. Kind of a general introduction of what the session would be on this slide, who should participate, and what to expect through the session. And on our PAT team, we can shape this to be what we want to accomplish, what we want to do through the breakout session. Here's just some early thoughts on a discussion agenda in building the workshop. The last couple of years we've had keynote speakers in these breakout sessions, and we'd like to reduce that this year and encourage more discussion and dialogue as we've been having on this call. So we might have keynotes that have maybe 5 minutes to present a topic or a theme or introduce the discussion, but they won't be 20-minute sessions that we've done in the past. So think in the breakout, we're suggesting kind of more inspirational dialogues on opportunity by some keynotes of 3 or 4 in order to kind of create some context, background, and discussion points going into the breakout sessions. We'd like to work around the PAT enablers, build on discussion of leading practices and opportunities, and our leadership forum is a working session we want to do sharing around advancements and practices and solutions, but it's not so much a solution session as it is build direction forward of where we would go. So a combination of both, come out of actions on what should be Fiatech's priorities around this opportunity going into the next year. So this needs a lot more work to develop into the working session, but early thoughts on how we would go forward. So that's it today, and we've gone a few minutes over. Apologize for that. I try to keep us on a tight schedule. We did have a little bit slow start at the beginning. So really good dialogue. Thanks for everyone's input and feedback. Anything, Gary, you'd like to add and wrap up?
Leadership Forum. Please attend. It's going to be a working session, and we have structured it in such a way that the various paths bleed into each other. So you shouldn't be faced with a choice of do I attend this one or that one. It's more like the paths kind of track with each other. But regardless, please attend. We need you.
And for the participants today, any concluding remarks or comments or feedback as we wrap up? Nope, we're running late. And so thanks for everyone's participation again. Great session today, and I look forward working with you in advancing this productivity team. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. Bye now.
Okay.